Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. So glad that you could join us today. In the mainstream media, we hear a lot of talk about different diseases, heart disease, cancer being all over the news. We hear a lot about Alzheimer's and maybe AIDS or even recently the Ebola virus. But rarely do we hear any mention in the mainstream media of sickle cell anemia, the trait or the disease. Our guest in studio today is Dr. Nina Anderson, President and CEO of Tova Community Health Incorporated. And she's here today to speak with us about sickle cell anemia and how it affects the body, and also to talk a bit about her activism and her efforts to maintain continued research in sickle cell. How are you doing today, Dr. Anderson?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
As I said opening, we don't hear a lot in the news or any in the news about sickle cell. I'm going to date myself and let you know that when I was in school and going to church as a child, people would come in from time to time and speak to us, especially in the Black community, about sickle cell. Once they left, there was no more mention of it. What exactly is sickle cell and how does it affect the body?
So sickle cell disease is an inherited genetic blood disorder. So thus it affects the blood cells. Mm-hmm. People with sickle cell disease make blood cells that look like a C or a crescent. So their blood cells are not round, they're not soft, and they don't always move or flow well through the blood vessels under certain conditions. Mm-hmm. So sickle cell disease is a condition that you're born with. And under certain conditions, being stress, infection, changes in the weather, dehydration, those sickle blood cells are very fragile, and under stressful conditions under the body, they break down, they clump up in the blood vessels. And when you deprive the body of oxygen and nutrients, it causes excruciating pain. And over the long haul, it can also affect the organs.
Now, when we're talking about over the long haul, is this something that is readily identifiable, say, as an infant, or is it known to manifest itself as far as symptoms later in life?
So, newborn screening program didn't start in 48 states until the early 1990s. So thus, when someone was either diagnosed with sickle cell, was based on symptoms or complications that the baby or the child had at a young age. Thanks to a renowned researcher who's now retired, Marilyn Gaston, she did a study that was actually published in the New England Journal of Medicine that looked at using penicillin, an antibiotic, to help prevent infection in infants and children less than 5 years of age, because in the 70s or 80s, babies were dying of complications of sickle cell, which was infection, and thus they weren't living as long as they are today. Mm-hmm. And because of her astounding research and the results of that, what they found was that the children who were in this study arm that got the penicillin actually lived. And if they were susceptible to a serious bacterial germ, they were able to ward that off. And so due to her research, one of the suggestions was we need to test babies at a younger age at birth. And so a newborn screening program was a public health initiative that started in 48 states in the 1990s, in which all babies are tested for sickle cell disease and sickle cell trait.
Now, as I mentioned, when I did hear of sickle cell, or maybe anyone who's listening, when they heard of sickle cell, any mention of it, they immediately associated it with the Black community. Is sickle cell something that is exclusively found in African Americans, or does it cross all boundaries?
So according to the World Health Organization, sickle cell is a global health disease. And it really has nothing to do with race. It has to do with a population of people that were able to survive the endemic of malaria. And so people that had the sickle gene or made sickle cells, the mosquito parasite could not get into the blood cell and also replicate. And thus they passed on this genetic mutation to their children. So it's in all parts of the world. In tropical areas, you'll see many groups of people, and not just people of African descent, who have sickle cell trait or other kinds of traits that have malaria protective properties that are either have the trait or other blood disorder types that we call hemoglobinopathies or sickle cell disease as well. So it really, in this country, yes, the fastest growing ethnic group of people living with sickle cell is actually Hispanic community, but it is prevalent in African Americans here in the United States as well.
Now, you mentioned hemoglobin. Are there different levels, say, of sickle cell? Now, when we're talking about diabetes, you have, type 1 and 2. You can be borderline. Is sickle cell identified along those lines as well? Is there a level? Do you have a little bit of sickle cell, or can you progress to having, say, fatal sickle cell anemia?
Well, there are 4 types of sickle cell, more common types, and that's sickle cell SC, SS, and sickle cell beta plus and sickle cell beta zero thalassemia. But there are also other forms of sickle cell disease that are less as prevalent as these 4 types. But there's no levels of sickle cell disease. You either have it or you don't.
Okay.
But within each type of sickle cell, people have different problems, different complications from their sickle cell. And it really also has nothing to do with the type of sickle cell you have. We're looking into genomics, and specific people that have certain genotypes may be more symptomatic than others. So there's no level of variation. It's you either have it or you don't.
Either have it or you don't. Okay. And as we wrap up, I'd like to give our listeners an opportunity to contact your organization and learn more about your activism and your awareness movement into sickle cell, and to possibly even donate. Where can we get a hold of you?
So we have a website you can go to, which is www.tovacommunityhealth.org. We also have an email where you can contact us if you have any questions or want to contact me, and that's contact@tovacommunityhealth.org. And we also just recently set up a GoFundMe account, which is gofundme.com/TovaCares.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. It's been a pleasure talking with Dr. Nina Anderson in studio today, discussing sickle cell, its traits, some of the ways that it's been identified, and also how awareness of the disease is becoming more and more widespread due to her research and activism, as well as many others. It's been great talking with you today, Dr. Anderson.
Thank you for having me. It's just great.
Great. And I'm hoping you'll come back and speak with us again.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au, hpr.fm, and you can subscribe to our podcast on iTunes.